Sanbonani, South Africans. Huemore, Dumelang, Molweni, Avsheni, Mda. Once more, good morning, South Africans. Today, I stand before you outside the factory where I launched Black Like Me in 1985 to offer you a vision for hope in the face of our national despair. Over the past 3 years, 3 decades, South Africans and the rest of the rest of the world has endured pain and suffering unlike which we have never experienced before in a very long time. The COVID pandemic ushered in an era of unprecedented economic hardship, exacerbating the impact of South Africa's slow economic growth over the past decade and exposing the depth of corruption of a morally bankrupt government. The war in Ukraine further precipitated a global cost of living crisis, driving up the cost of food and fuel. This has been devastating for the country that suffers endemic unemployment, with 12 million South Africans without jobs and 26 million of our people forced to rely on meager social grants just to survive. To make matters worse, the Eskom crisis worsens by the day with the stage 6 load shedding, now something we are expected to tolerate on a frequent basis. I cannot remember when last we had anything resembling a stable supply of electricity in our country. The crisis in South Africa are a long time in the making by an uncaring and corrupt government that has deprived South Africans of the hope for a better life for all. But recent global events have served to hasten our decline as a nation and brought into sharp focus the depth of our despair. I do not want to dwell any longer on the numerous challenges we face as a nation. These challenges are all too familiar to South Africans that live with them on a daily basis. Today, I say enough. Enough of the hopelessness, enough of the decline. On Thursday, the President will deliver the State of the Nation address and repeat the same empty promises about creating jobs and ending load shedding. But his words will be hollow and fail to inspire hope, just as the government has failed to inspire hope for the past 2 decades. Enough is enough. Today, I stand before you to share a vision for a future South Africa defined by prosperity, grounded in an unwavering belief that we can and we will emerge from the depth of our national despair. Some of you may be familiar with my story and the history of Black Like Me, but I do not take it for granted that my fellow South Africans appreciate the significance of why we are launching ActionSA's vision for an inclusive and prosperous South Africa outside the factory where I started my business almost 4 decades back. I was born into poverty in Amanskral, in a village called Garamotse. Not all far from here in Garangua, where we find ourselves today. My father, unfortunately, passed away when I was 2 years old, and my mother was a domestic worker in Johannesburg in Sandton, where I currently live. Like many South Africans, they do not have the good fortune of being raised in a traditional family environment. I was raised by my sisters and my grandfather, who played a key role in my life. Life was not easy, but my grandfather taught me not to focus on the obstacles to my potential success, but rather to search for solutions. He instilled in me a sense of pride and appreciation of the value of hard work. For a black man born under apartheid regime, success was a distant dream. But my grandfather made me determined to overcome my humble origins and aspire to a better life. My grandfather, like most parents, I believe, desire for their children to live a better life than they did. He had a dream that I would succeed and escape the bonds of poverty that I was born into. Today, as I stand outside the building where I launched my business in 1985, in partnership with a white Afrikaner from Boksburg, that is the same dream I have for the people of South Africa. Connie, my wife of 40 years, and I were able to build a successful business with our partners at a time when it was illegal for a black man, a white man, and an Indian man to work together the same way that we did. We were able to succeed despite the obstacles apartheid government put in our way. But it is undeniable that we were the exception to the rule. The vast majority of our people who grew up around me were unable to overcome the barriers to upward mobility placed in their way by a government that did not want them to succeed. That is why in 1994, when we had our first democratic elections, I proudly voted for Nelson Mandela's ANC. I was excited about the prospect of building a non-racial South Africa, where the challenges my partners and I had and faced would be a thing of the past. I was excited about an explosion of black entrepreneurship that would undoubtedly arise from the demolition of apartheid-era legislative barriers that has served to limit my opportunities and the opportunities of those around me. I had a dream for a future South Africa where all South Africans would not just be equal on paper, but genuine counterparts in a dynamic and vibrant economy where prosperity would be shared by all South Africans. But my optimism was short-lived. While we initially made progress as a nation in the early years of our democracy, it became clear that the dream ahead of a shared prosperity was not held by this ANC government. Instead, we witnessed the implementation of legislation aimed at empowering and enriching a new class of politically connected black elite, while the black majority that had been marginalized by the apartheid government was left to struggle on their own. Yes, access to services may have expanded, but access to opportunity did not. 3 decades after our democratic transition, our country remains defined by apartheid-era spatial planning, unequal access to quality education, unreliable services and dysfunctional infrastructure, and a growing gap between the rich and the poor. The Garangua today is no longer the bustling area of economic opportunity that it was in 1985 when we launched our business here in these premises. Today it lies dormant, reflective of a country that has failed to live up to its potential under a corrupt and incompetent government. The reality is that the vast majority of those who were marginalized in the past remain condemned to a life without dignity and opportunity for upward mobility. As long as this remains the case, the promise of our Constitution is not worth the paper it is written on. My fellow South Africans, when we launched ActionSA in August 2020, I dedicated our party to you, the people of our country. ActionSA was born out of a wide-scale public consultation process that saw us engage with millions of South Africans about the values that they hold dear to them and the future they want for our country. We launched this party because it was clear that the vast majority of South Africans share our unwavering commitment to fixing our country. South Africans are proud, capable, and resilient people. We care deeply about our country and desire to see it work for all those who call it home. We are a social and family-oriented people who value our communities. We appreciate strong families, however they are composed, provide social stability and support. The vast majority of South Africans value diversity and want to build an inclusive society based on mutual respect. Most importantly, despite the challenges we face, we recognize our collective potential and believe that hope is not lost. We are committed to achieving the dream of a prosperous, equal and fair nation where all South Africans are equal counterparts in building a shared future. This was the dream of our future that I shared with millions of South Africans in 1994. This dream has since faded. Today, I stand before you to revive that dream. A South African dream, a shared South ActionSA vision for an inclusive and prosperous future for South Africa, for you and I. My fellow South Africans, imagine a future where our country is healed from its painful past. A South Africa defined by hope and prosperity. A country that inspired patriotism, that its people are proud to call their home. Imagine a South African nation where race, gender, sexuality, or any other demographic factors are no longer an indication of the barriers people are likely to face in their lives. A nation where all citizens live in dignity with equal opportunities for upward mobility. This is a South Africa that has reclaimed its position among the leading developing economies of the world and demonstrates moral leadership on the international stage once more. It is a country that has finally been freed from the grip of corruption and is led by ethical, competent, efficient government and civil service that puts the needs of residents ahead of narrow political agenda. Imagine a caring government that believes that the best way out of poverty is through expanding access to quality education, removing historical barriers, and unlocking economic opportunity. A government that prioritizes the implementation of innovative, decisive, and just economic policies that enables opportunities and empowers businesses to create jobs for South Africans. A government that has abandoned its obsession with equality of outcomes in favor of ensuring true equality of opportunity. This is a pro-poor government that ensures that the state executes its role protecting the marginalized and most vulnerable through the delivery of reliable basic services, quality health care, and sufficient social assistance to those in need. In this South Africa, citizens can strive for a life of prosperity, secure in the knowledge that their basic needs are met. Imagine a growing economy with ample economic opportunities to provide households with the dignity that comes from earning an income. An economy that is no longer captive to the stranglehold of self-serving labor unions. There is no doubt that unions have a role to play, but they cannot have a veto power that protects the employed at the expense of the unemployed. This is an economy based on the dignity of creating jobs, where households no longer have to rely on inadequate social grants just to survive. In this economy, growth is measured not just in terms of material wealth, but in terms of the tools and resources it provides citizens for upward mobility so that they can strive towards living a prosperous life. In this economy, entrepreneurs are flourishing because we have finally removed the constraints to doing business that makes it difficult for companies to grow and create jobs for South Africans. Government and the private sector are working hand in hand and as partners in pursuit of collective prosperity. As a result, this is a nation of narrowing inequality where all South Africans are not only equal on paper, but genuine counterparts in a dynamic and vibrant economy. Imagine a country where residents finally feel safe in their homes and trust the South African police services to protect them. A country where everyone is treated equally before the law and crimes are prosecuted fairly without fear or favor. A country where we have restored the rule of law and freed our law enforcement agencies and National Prosecuting Authority from the grip of political influence. And independent scorpions is once again investigating corruption without political interference. This is a South Africa led by a government that understands that dealing with crime, violence and abuse means addressing the underlying socio-economic causes of lawlessness, not merely addressing the symptoms. A government that is dedicated to addressing the hopelessness and desperations caused by poverty and unemployment. This South Africa is home to a society built on a foundation of strong communities that work in partnership with government to provide social stability and support the most vulnerable amongst us. A society based on mutual respect that prides itself in our diversity and embrace our differences. At the center of this South Africa is a world-class education system that provides equal access to quality education for all citizens, both urban and rural, starting with universal access to early childhood development programs. An education system overseen by a competent Department of Education that isn't beholden to SADTU, that ensures we have competent administration in schools and schools inspectors that ensure that dedicated principals and teachers are providing quality education to our learners. This education system will not only prioritize academic outcomes, but also focus on empowering young people with tangible skills required to be active participants in the economy and enable them to take control of their destinies. In this South Africa, citizens are empowered to exercise the full extent of their constitutional rights and freedoms. All South Africans that have access to quality services and good health care and live in a safe and secure communities, they care for each other in the spirit of Ubuntu. This is a South Africa led by ActionSA. My fellow South Africans, the South African dream I've laid out for you was born out of the hopes and aspirations of a nation that has been constrained in its potential by a self-serving government that prioritizes looting state resources over empowering the people it was elected to serve. But the potential of our nation remains. A reimagined South African dream is without doubt within our reach. This dream is more than just ActionSA's vision for a future South Africa. It is a rallying call aimed at inspiring South Africans to unite behind the project of fixing South Africa. Since my entrance into politics in 2016, one thing about our country that has never ceased to inspire me is the willingness of South Africans to get to work and make our country work. But what many of them have expressed to me is a sense of hopelessness in the face of government incapable of providing a vision of hope to unite behind. I've engaged with young people filled with the potential who do not see the value in their vote because established political parties have failed to inspire them with something to vote for. I've engaged with small business owners with grand plans to provide jobs to thousands of South Africans, but who struggle to succeed because of red tape and load shedding. I've engaged retired individuals with valuable skills who stand ready to return to work and play their part in fixing our country, but feel sidelined by a government that would rather bring in Cuban doctors and engineers than tap into the knowledge we possess as a country. And I have engaged with former civil servants who remain dedicated to serving our country with pride, but are unable to do so as part of an unethical government that is only serving itself. As I've said before, I believe there's nothing bad about South Africa that cannot be fixed by what is good about South Africa. The good, hardworking, law-abiding, family-oriented, freedom-loving people of our beloved country. Together, we have the power to fix our beloved country, South Africa. Over the coming months, ActionSA will be embarking on a national campaign to share this dream with the people of South Africa and unite them behind a collective effort to place our country on a path to prosperity once again. We want to rekindle the hope that so many of us felt in 1994 and re-inspire those who have become despondent in the face of overwhelming despair. We want to re-enlist retirees and former civil servants and seek their assistance in putting together a plan of action to turn around our country. We want to restore confidence in our business community and remind them that government does not have to be the enemy of progress. It can be a valuable partner in unlocking growth. Finally, we want to re-engage young people, the future leaders of our country, so that they can realize the power of their voice and the vote in shaping their future. This campaign will take us through to our inaugural policy conference later this year, where we will be putting forward solution-based alternatives to the failed policies of a confused government. An alternative based on the voices of South Africans and policy experts, not just views of politicians. My fellow South Africans, our societies have endured great hardships because of the corruption and incompetence of our current government. Having emerged from the depth of apartheid with a sense of hope, under the current government, we have been left to drown in despair. But we have the power to define our collective destiny again. We have the power to chart a new course for South Africa towards collective prosperity. We have the power to reimagine a South African dream for an inclusive and prosperous future. And we have the power to give life to that dream, starting with the removal of a failed government in the next general elections coming in just over 14 months' time. Let's unite behind a dream for South Africa we can all be proud of. Together, we can fix South Africa. And I thank you.